Thank you very much. I was expecting an incredible welcoming speech, but anyway. I was asked to come along tonight to talk about this very issue, mainly because my qualifications was that I come from a working class background, and I thought, that was an interesting comment. So, and also my campaign in regard to the Greyhound ban in New South Wales, and how it struck me personally as well, even though I've never owned a greyhound, never really been to greyhound races, probably one or two in my life. But I grew up in the country. I come from rural New South Wales, Grafton, the North Coast, and I moved to Sydney, western suburbs of Sydney, Auburn, a very multicultural place. And I worked with people whose parents were factory workers, and probably worked on construction sites. In fact, my first job was working in the factory as a silver water at the age of 16 as a machinist in that factory at Belter Engineering, and then going from that to working on the Sydney Water Board, digging pipelines, sewage pipelines of everything. And actually my kids and my wife, I drive them mad because I'm usually driving around Sydney and I say, see this suburb? And they go, yeah. And I said, I'll put the sewer pipes in this suburb. Yeah, so it's a continuing joke within our family and how they take the piss out of me. So one thing that really interested me, because I've been very much involved in politics, you don't get to the cut and thrust of being president of the Australian Labor Party without having blood on your hands and fighting through that battle of getting there. So one thing that really hit me, and it happened in the Howard years when I was president. I used to go around and visit local branches. In fact, that was quite an interesting experience because I used to turn up and they used to get me to sign the meeting book, president of the Australian Labor Party. And I asked, why did I have to put that in? I just signed the book, and they said, because you're the first president that's ever come to our branch. Because I had this crazy idea that you had to talk to the members. It's like a business idea. If your members aren't selling your party, then your party is not going to, people aren't going to buy the product. They're not going to buy your party at all. So I went around and went to about 126 branches in my year as president of the ALP, and went to interesting places like Gunnedah. There's one branch, they called themselves the Democratic People's Republic of Brunswick, and they actually gave me a certificate, which was very nice. I was citizen number 1, which is I keep that on my wall at home. And it was an interesting exercise because I got to meet the Workers' Party members, and the disconnect between the Working Party members and the voters of the Workers' Party and the actual elite of the Australian Labor Party was really stark to me, because like the media in Australia, it's all becoming Sydney-centric. It's all being based here, and opinions and everything is all coming out of central Sydney. And I just found it interesting that what people told me and that. And I remember once I come back from one of those meetings out in the branches, and we having a discussion about working class people who are voting for Howard, Howard's battlers, as people used to call them. And it was an interesting conversation because, as with my mad idea of meeting branch members, as many as possible, to get us to vote for the Labor Party, our own members. It was interesting how people talked about these things. So this was 2005, 2006, and people were using language like what Hillary Clinton used in the election campaign for the presidency of the United States. Things like, these people are idiots. These are why are they voting for Howard? These people are fools. They're complete, they're just uneducated working class swill, which I thought was very funny because we were the working class party. And this is how, my argument back to them was, well, if we're going to win elections, we've got to win our members, we've got to win people who voted for us, who have been strong for us. And I remember going to a barbecue in Penrith with a few mates of mine from high school. We went to school in Auburn together in high school. And so they were people in Auburn, if people know, is a very strong Labor seat. It's been since 1892. It's been a Labor seat, and so people in their DNA from Auburn just vote Labor. They're just like robots. I'll just walk in, tick the box, and off they go. I noticed during the conversation of that barbecue, I suddenly realised out of the 20 people that were there, I was the only one who voted Labor at that barbecue. And that was 2004, and everyone remembers the 2004 election. It was a big win for the Liberal Party, the coalition. They not only won the lower house, but they also won the Senate as well, and it was an electoral disaster for the Australian Labor Party. And so I said, look, we're really getting disconnected from our membership. We're also getting disconnected from the people who vote from us. And I noticed this shift in the way people were, politicians were thinking and the way they do, and they've all got caught up in this 24-hour news cycle. I used to get emails at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night giving me instructions for the next day, and then I'd get an email on Monday night at 10 o'clock to me instructions for the day after. So we had this 24-hour thing, and it worked for us. You know, it worked for us because we won the 2007 election. But also I started to notice that the figures where, when I was growing up in the political area, it was that Labor would get 40 in the 40s, and the coalition would get in the 40s, and then you had that small group in the middle. The last few elections, the figures have actually been dropping, and a third of Australians now don't tick that first box for Labor, Liberal or the Nationals. A third. It's only through the preferential system that a lot of these seats and a lot of these Senate seats are now won, because people are turning off from these major parties. And it's a very simple thing, which I think is that people, we are simple, us human beings. We just want jobs. We just want to be able to feed our families. We just want to get them an education, be able to afford a house, go on holidays and make sure our health's fine. And we're very happy for that. And we don't care about who people want to marry. That's their business. We've got enough problems with their own sex life without worrying about anyone else. Yeah, I made the comment once. I said, "You can marry Gowena. That's your problem." But it's and then all of a sudden, what's happening is you're getting this sort of Twitterati, this small group of people who are able to now capture this space. And what you're seeing is in the last few days, is in the last few years, in fact, in which has really come about, which the Greyhound ban in itself wasn't the real issue. The real issue was the frustration of people being told what they should do in their lives. And the other thing too about it is a lot of working class people, even though they may have not have gone to the Greyhounds and not had a Greyhound, knew a Greyhound person. I remember a good friend of mine, his wife, she put on Facebook, she just put on Facebook, my father-in-law had Greyhounds. And then she took it down. She had to take it down because she was abused, really attacked and by this sort of Facebook Twitterati. And she was a housewife, a woman who worked in a preschool. And just was an ordinary Australian person, and she just copped this pizzling just because she put up my father-in-law had Greyhounds. And I knew Mr. Bellamy, who lived up the road from our house, 2 houses up. My earliest in South Grafton, my earliest memories of life is actually playing with his Greyhounds in his backyard. You know, I must have been 3 years old or something like that. And Mr. Bellamy was one of these guys who used to come around in his station wagon and pick us all up and take us to the footy. Used to coach us at footy and was one of these knockabout good Aussie type blokes. He was He was a lot older man. He was, in fact, he was a veteran from the First World War. Fought in the First World War, and this is a lovely bloke, and his children were lovely, incredible people. And it shows my age. I actually don't even know his first name. It was always Mr. Bellamy. And I knew Mr. Bellamy, and I said, this bloke is not some sort of, bastard. And this is how he was a good community person. And a lot of people across Western Sydney, across rural communities, saw this as an attack on their way of life, and this is a foot in the door for other things. A lot of farmers started worrying about what are they going to do next about us having sheep and cattle. What other people started worrying about the horse racing industries and other things, and it was very much an attack on people's pastimes. And I remember what really convinced me that this, because I took it up. A lot of friends of mine who were lawyers and inner city people living in the inner city, they said, Warren, we've never seen you so passionate about this area. And I said, I got passionate about it because it was attacking people who had no power, who were just defenceless, ordinary, everyday people who didn't have the corridors of power. And they were brutalised in the most savage way on Facebook and the Twitterati. And so that's why I stood up. I said, I'm in a position where I can do something about this. And I took it on. And they said, why are you so passionate about this? And I said, because I'm sick and tired of ordinary Australians, ordinary people, being treated like they're deplorables and treated like they're someone from Mars. They're uneducated swill. In actual fact, these are the battlers. These are the people who actually keep the economy going. And that was when I stood up for that. And actually, in the last few days, we've seen another battle, which I thought was incredibly stupid. And I'll put it on the board. I am a supporter of same-sex marriage, but this attack on Cooper's beer was just an amazing, incredible. I watched that video and I thought nothing about that video. I just thought it was just a civil conversation. And when I read the article that came out of Cooper's in regard to the attack, the savage attack on them, is this is the type of world that we're heading in. And what I've noticed from a lot of people now is, and this is one of the things that's probably coming out in polling and that as well, is that they are very shy about telling people who they're voting for, and they're very shy about what policies they support and that. And so what we're seeing now is, even though the people are saying things showing that the voting for the major political parties on a downward spiral, the major political parties actually planning so that they're more focusing on the preference flow. In fact, when I was president of the ALP, we used to run courses on for people to work on the preference flow, because we knew that we weren't going to get the first tick in some of these boxes. And so that's what they're depending on for their survival. And other things that I hear in the community, like when I got to say the 2016 election was the worst election I've ever actually seen. It went for 8 weeks. I think the last 2 weeks of the elections, my wife and I and the kids actually got on an aeroplane and left the country. And I had to say, and I know I'll probably get abused, I had to say that Turnbull looked like in that election, in the way the Liberal and coalitions, except for the National Party, did quite well. They ran that election. It was probably the worst election campaign I've seen since Billy McMahon in 1972. And that's why they lost those 14 seats. The other thing thing I noticed with a lot of my mates was a friend of mine, Mario. He was a first-generation Australian. His parents got off the boat they come from Sicily. I remember them as a kid. They couldn't even speak English. And it took them years to be able to master the English language. But they were workers. They worked in factories, and his mother worked as a cleaner to help him buy a house. And they were just simple folks, the most simple, beautiful people I've ever met, but they fed They had 8 kids, and they fed them and brought them up and made them very good citizens. Now, Mario's a delivery van driver. He drives a van that delivers to the shops and stores around Sydney. When he told me that every time he hears Turnbull speak about innovation, he heard, "I've lost my job. A robot's going to take over my car, my vehicle, and I'm not going to work." And he actually was almost in tears one day when we're sitting having a beer, and it wasn't Cooper's, it was actually Tui's. And he said, he was almost in tears, and he said, if I lose my job, I lose meaning of who I am. And this is what the politicians at the top end are not getting. They're not getting how to talk to people, how to listen to what people are saying, and how to bring them through this phase. And one of the things I really missed was, I go back to the three prime ministers, which I admire, which is Hawke, Keating, and Howard. Was they knew how to listen, and they knew how to work and do things. But more so Hawke and Howard than Keating. But Keating was a very good operator working with Hawke. Hawke was a knockabout bloke. He was the Rhodes Scholar, in fact. It was amazing that a Rhodes Scholar, he had the world record for sculling a beer. And he does it every cricket game I see him at. He sculls the beer still at 80. I wish I wasn't going to be like that at 80. But he knew how to talk to a bloke on the street in a shopping market, and then was able to go and talk at a Rhodes Scholars meeting, and also then talk to people. And he took us on a journey. They took us on a reforming journey, which cost a lot. When I bought my first house, I was paying 18% interest rates. They were telling us, we've got to get through this, and as honest to us. I remember Keating's words about, this is the recession that we have to have. But we're going to take you to good times, and we're going to get you there. And the good times did come. And we saw that through the 90s, and we saw that up until about 2007, up to the great financial crisis. We saw the incredible times that we had. And this is what's happening in the world at the moment. It's a Western democracy issue. It is, so it goes right across the Western democracy. And when I talk about that, I'm not just, people think the Western democracy is just a bunch of white people. In actual fact, it's Japanese in the Western democracy, so are the South Koreans and other people as well. And it is a problem that we have that is getting this divide between the elites up here and the rest of us. And what I see, great institutions like universities, which survived through the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages and through the French Revolution and so on, about this thing of academic freedom, is now you've got comedians in America and other places who refuse to go to universities because they can't even crack jokes anymore, because of this incredible vitriolic attack that is happening on people. And this is where people are. We're living in interesting times. We're living at the advancement of technology. We're living in, people are living longer. Our children will probably live to be 150. It's just, I was talking to a professor in the United States, and he said, my job is to keep people alive, and we can do that with the advancement of medicine and technology. What that means for us as a society is going to be very interesting. Because if you think about that, 65 you retire, you're actually going to live longer in retirement. So there are a whole lot of things that are happening. You've got the scaremongering and carrying on about global warming and climate change and stuff. And people are nervous and scared. And it doesn't take much of a person to work out that in a society, if you look at the elites, they're usually the people at the top end of the pyramid. The vast majority of people are getting very nervous and very scared about where this country's going and where Western civilization is going. And that's why I just find it incredibly crazy about how politicians and people are out of touch, in which the Greyhound Ban proved, because it destroyed Australia's most popular premier and almost brought down Australia's most popular government. over just one issue, which sort of become the symbol for a whole range of other issues. So thank you for that, and we can have a bit of a chat.